Hello everyone, my name is Hubert and welcome to Teach Me channel. Today we'll be talking about GCSE Maths basic proportion calculations. Now, previously we covered some basics of proportions, what they are and how they work, but now we are going to be applying some of proportion principles to solve some questions. We will start off with these sort of basic questions where you don't even really get into the algebra of proportions, and that's what we'll be covering in this video. We'll be covering these sort of more basic questions, and then in the next math video, we'll get into more sort of algebra side of the proportion, the more algebraic questions. So, without further ado, let's get started. We will be covering this by doing examples. I think that's the best way to learn this particular topic, by just doing example questions, where I will just explain everything as we go along. So, let's start with direct proportion. So, we have a question here. It takes 1,560 grams of flour to make 3 loaves of bread. How much flour do you need for 15 loaves? Okay, so what do we do in such a case? So we know that to make 3 loaves, you need this much. Well, there is a shortcut here, I will cover that later, but let's do it the proper step-by-step way that will allow you to do every question of this type. So, if we have this much of flour, and that makes us 3 loaves, what do we need? How much flour do we need for 1 loaf? That's the very first thing we need to figure out. So, for 1 loaf, we need this divided by 3, right? Because that's 3 loaves, and in order to find out 1, we just divide this by 3. So we divide this, 1,560 grams divided by 3 loaves, which will give us, if you put that in a calculator, it will give you 520 grams of flour to make 1 loaf. Now, how much flour do you need for 15 loaves? So we just multiply this. For 15, we just do 520 grams multiplied by 15, because that's the grams per loaf, and we multiply it by 15 loaves of bread. And now that will give us, if you put that in a calculator, that will give us 7,800 grams. Done. And that's how much flour you need to make 15 loaves. Now, this is the correct, the sort of textbook way of doing that. This way you will solve any sort of direct proportionality question they throw at you. You will solve it using this exact method. However, if you're in a rush, sometimes in some questions you'll be able to take a shortcut. Here, this is an example of a question where you can take that shortcut, and I will show you quickly. So, if you noticed, this much flour is to make 3 loaves. However, we need to make 15 loaves. So, in other words, 3 times 5 is equal to 15, right? 5 times that, so 5 times that will give us the 15 loaves. So we simply multiply this by 5. 1,560 grams multiplied by 5. And that will give us the same answer, 7,800 grams for 15 loaves. So that's a shortcut you can take. You can just keep it in that group of 3 loaves, but just multiply that whole amount by 5 times to give us 15 loaves. You can do that when these numbers divide through each other cleanly. You can sort of do it this way, and that's a good shortcut to take. But, of course, if you forget it in an exam or something, you can always do it the basic way, where you have to find the amount for 1 unit. So here, in this case, the amount of flour we need for one loaf, and then you multiply it through the amount of units. So here we multiply the flour needed for 1 loaf by 15 to give us the amount of flour we need for 15 loaves. So that's it for direct proportionality. So that was a relatively simple question. Now, what about more complex questions especially that deal with inverse proportion? We will move on to that. Okay, so here we have a question that deals with inverse proportionality. So, it takes 4 bakers 2 hours to make 24 loaves of bread. So, what is interesting about this question? The more bakers we have, the less time it takes to make 24 loaves of bread. So, that's the sort of the inverse part of that question. That the more bakers we have, the less time it takes to make that bread. There's the same amount of bread. So, the question asks us, how long will it take 7 bakers to make 273 loaves of bread? So, this is interesting because we have more bakers to work with, but we need to make more bread. And we need to figure out how long it will take. So how are we going to approach this? There are many ways you can approach this, and your textbooks might give you a different approach. You may have learnt yourself a different approach. There are so many ways you can approach this. Mathematically, there are so many ways. I will teach you the way I do it, and I think it makes most sense, and I think is the easiest one to remember, because the rule is very similar to the previous question we dealt with. All you need to do is work out the amount of 1 unit, figure out the 1 unit at its core, the 1 unit only. And then you just work it out. So it uses the same core principle, which is why I like to use this method. So without further ado, let's get our teeth into that. So, it takes 4 bakers 2 hours to make 24 loaves of bread, and now we have 7 bakers making this much. So like I said, we need to find the core unit. So we need to figure out how much bread can 1 baker make in 1 hour. That's what we need to know. So first of all, we will be cutting it down using 2 steps. So first of all, let's cut down the 2 hours. So how much bread can 4 bakers make in 1 hour? 4 bakers, I will shorten that with a B, in 1 hour with an H. So 4 bakers in 1 hour can make half of that, right? Because we divide 24 by 2, and that will give us the 1 hour. So 24 breads divided by 2 hours will give us 12 breads. 4 bakers can make 12 breads in 1 hour. However, we still are dealing with 4 bakers. Like I said, we need to get down to the very, very bottom, the very core of 1 unit. That's the whole principle we're working on. So, how are we going to deal with that? Well, we do the sort of second step cutting down, which is what I like to call it. We divide those 12 breads, we divide by 4, because that's 4 bakers making them. So we assuming that all these bakers are working at the same sort of efficiency, and 1 baker will make 1/4 of that. So we divide that 12 breads by 4 bakers. So now we're doing 1 baker in 1 hour. So we do 12 divided by 4. And that will give us 3 breads. So 3 breads per hour. So 1 baker makes 3 breads in 1 hour. That's what we're boiling down to. That's our core unit. Now, we can use that to figure this out the similar way we figured out the previous question. How long will it take 7 bakers to make 273 loaves of bread? So we are going to step this up, similar way we worked it down here. We are going to work it up here. So now we know 1 baker makes 3 breads in 1 hour. So what about 7 bakers? How many breads in 1 hour will 7 bakers make? So 7 bakers will make 7 bakers in 1 hour. So we do 7 bakers multiplied by 3, because 3 breads per hour for 1 baker. So that's 21 breads made in an hour by 7 bakers. Now, we need to scale it up again. Well, we don't need to scale. Actually, we don't need to scale it up again. Sorry. We just have 273 loaves of bread. So that's what we're essentially scaling up to. So that's how much we get in 1 hour using 7 bakers. So now, if we do 273 loaves of bread divided by 21 loaves of bread per hour, we will get our answer, our final answer of 7 bakers in X hours. So we divide this by this, and that will give us 13 hours. And that's what it will take 7 bakers to make this many loaves of bread, assuming the same speed as we did here. And that's our answer. I will underline it for you. That's our answer. So just to recap, what did we do here? Well, we worked it down here to our core unit of 1 baker and 1 hour. How many breads does that give us? And then we work it up here. So we figure out, if we have 7 bakers to work with, how much bread will we make in 1 hour using 7 bakers? So we just multiplied 7 times 3 breads per hour, giving us 21 breads per hour. And then we just divide the total required amount by 21 breads per hour to give us the final amount of hours it takes for 7 bakers to make 273 loaves of bread. That's it. That's how you do it. Now, like I said before, there are many different ways to do it, but I think this one makes sense because it follows the core principle of working it down to a single unit before figuring it out. So, this is it for today, guys. So, this is how we covered the basic questions to do with proportionality. Next time we do maths videos, we will be covering the sort of more algebraic side of it, solving these things with algebra. So, thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate when you guys watch my videos. If you want to stay up to date on daily math, science and biomedical science videos, hit that subscribe button below. And if you liked that video, and I hope it helped you a lot, give me that big thumbs up. Thank you for listening again, and see you next time.